Welcome to the Bowel Chronicles, where we dive deep into the world of bowel health. I'm your host, Nikki Kilpatrick, and on this podcast we have raw and candid conversations with individuals facing various bowel conditions and illnesses. Through personal stories and shared experiences, we illuminate resilience and courage in the face of adversity. Be reminded that each story is personal and unique. These conversations are not to be taken as medical advice or to replace guidance from a doctor or healthcare provider. Our aim is to inspire and empower through these amazing stories, amplifying voices often unheard. So join us as we embark on this journey together. Sit back, listen, and be inspired. Enjoy the episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bowel Chronicles. I'm your host, Nikki Kilpatrick, and today we're joined by the lovely Evie, who is going to talk to us all about having a urostomy stoma, which is something very different that we don't normally talk a lot about here on the Bowel Chronicles. It tends to be IBDs and bowel cancer and other types of stomas and ostomies. So Evie, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to come on and share your story.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Evie, you're just 28 years young, very, very young to have gone through a major surgery into your bladder where they've created a urostomy, a stoma. Take us back. When did this journey start? Like, have you always had something going on with the bladder? Tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and how that kind of came about for you.
No, I started having issues with my bladder in March of 2018. Prior to that, I had no bladder issues, had never had a UTI, no idea what a catheter was, nothing kind of to predict that what had happened would happen. But 2018, I had an operation that went wrong, a pelvic operation that went wrong, and they damaged my bladder in the process. I also developed Fowler syndrome, so it was a bit of a double whammy when I came around from theatre. I was catheterised urethral while I was in hospital, much to the reluctance of the team that I was under. They tried to send me home with over 3 litres in my bladder. It was only because I refused to go until they did a bladder scan. They popped a urethral catheter in, drained my bladder, and then took it back out and said, we'll see how you go for 24 hours, just keep drinking. Keep going to the bathroom and put the tap on when you're in there. And 24 hours passed. I hadn't gone to the toilet. I had again upwards of over 2 litres, heading towards 3 litres again in my bladder. So they popped a urethral catheter back in, sent me on my way with said catheter, one leg bag, and said, you'll be seen in clinic at some point. I had no idea what I was doing with a catheter, how I was meant to look after this thing, whether I could work. I had absolutely no idea. I had a follow-up a few weeks later for a TWOC, so a trial without catheter, which I failed. And there was a few TWOCs, probably in the space of about 2 months, that were all failed. But I had very little support from the team that I was seeing. I'd go in and see the nurses in the catheter clinic, be TWOC'd and then sent back on my way. It was trying to plead on the mercy of the GP surgery and the stoma nurses actually at the hospital that I was going to get leg bags, night bags, work out how on earth I managed this thing that was been put in my body and what I was meant to do with it. I had a urethral.
21 you were?
I was
2021?
21. Yeah, almost 22.
Walking around with
Yeah.
catheter.
Yeah. I had that for 6 months. In that 6 months, I'd requested a referral to a urologist that I'd seen some positive reviews on support groups and kind of private healthcare websites for. He worked at a hospital local to me, and because there was nothing happening at the hospital that I was currently under, I requested a referral to him. That was 6 months with a urethral. He then decided that a suprapubic catheter was the way forward. I had no testing on my bladder. No one had tried to work out why it had stopped working, or what was going on, or why I kept failing my TWOCs. He just went straight to basically, you're of an age where you are likely sexually active, and a urethral catheter is probably not the best for you when you're trying to work and live your life as a now 22-year-old, we'll do a suprapubic. So I had the suprapubic. That was not a positive experience. I had one for a year and a half, and they were being replaced in theatre quite regularly. The district nurses in the area that I live in at the time had very little training on changing suprapubic catheters. So any or every time that it needed changing, it had come out. I had an infection. I had to go back to the hospital that I had it fitted at to have it replaced in theatre. That went on for a year and a half, and during that year and a half, I was referred to a much bigger specialist teaching hospital, further away from home than the hospital that I was currently under, but they had a lot more access to kind of research and doctors that had a little bit more knowledge than those that I was under. So I was referred to them at the end of 2019, and it was them that diagnosed me with Fowler syndrome. They agreed that a suprapubic was not the way forward, that they didn't think my bladder would regain function, but that potentially having a Mitrofanoff would mean that I could build my bladder function and capacity back up by intermittently catheterizing with the Mitrofanoff. It would force my bladder to rebuild its capacity because I'd been on free drainage for the time that I'd had any form of catheter. So my bladder had lost its dexterity and its ability to hold more than about 50 ml.
Okay, so what is a Mitrofanoff?
So a Mitrofanoff is a continent urinary diversion. So whereas a urostomy is classed as an incontinent diversion, you have a level of control over emptying your bladder when you've got a Mitrofanoff. So it's either done with your native bladder or with a neobladder, so they can remove your bladder and make your bladder out of bowel, which is essentially just a pouch. It's not going to do anything other than hold the urine until you drain the Mitrofanoff. So it can be made, the Mitrofanoff itself can be made from your appendix or a piece of your small bowel, and it can be placed, normally it's placed in the belly button, but it can be placed lower down on the abdomen depending on kind of the dexterity of the person in terms of being able to catheterize, and also if you're a wheelchair user, your lifestyle, etc., etc. So I had mine placed in my belly button. So I had a channel made out of my appendix that ran internally from my belly button to my bladder. And theoretically, that will have been intermittently catheterizable. So from the outside, apart from my midline scar, you wouldn't have known I was any different to any other member of the public that I was stood next to. But whenever I felt the need to go to the toilet, I would have been able to pop a catheter down my Mitrofanoff into my bladder, empty it, remove the catheter, and go about my day. That did not go to plan. I was septic when I came out of theatre. This was just before the pandemic hit. So there was quite a lot of COVID cases in the hospitals, but we hadn't been put into lockdown yet. So the kind of outpatient care when I'd recovered from the op and the sepsis enough to go home was not as you would have expected it to be had we not been in the global pandemic that we were in. So having recovered from like the op and the sepsis enough to go home, I developed a open wound just below my belly button, probably about that long. That was packed and redressed every day for 11 months, and it just wouldn't heal. Because it wouldn't heal, I went back to theatre 11 months later to have it stitched from the inside out to try and encourage it to close up. But that made the Mitrofanoff channel that they'd created very scarred and very stenosed. So every time they tried to take the catheter out and leave it out for a period of time, the channel would start to close off. So the intermittent catheterization part of the Mitrofanoff never happened for me, and that was permanently catheterized then, pretty much the same as my SPC, up until I had my urostomy in October 23.
So obviously they got to October 23 and there was nothing else they can do because this wouldn't heal.
So I was regularly having emergency surgery to replace the Mitrofanoff catheters because my bladder was so angry, inflamed, irritated that the balloons popped, or I was getting such regular infections. I had a number of bouts of sepsis that every time you have an infection with the catheter should be changed. So the mixture of regular general anesthetics, regular infections, and sepsis meant my body just wasn't getting a chance to recover from one issue before I went into the next. And it was decided in September 23 when I met my new consultant that there was nothing left really that they could do. They'd ticked everything off, and that a urostomy was kind of the final option. I had to tick every box to be approved to go to the national MDT, for my case to be taken to the national MDT. So in, when was it? December of 22, I had to have a trial SNS, so sacral nerve stimulator. I had to have a trial of that, and my consultant at the time said that there was a less than 5% chance of it being successful. Basically, he knew it wasn't going to work, but it had to be a box that was ticked in order for me to even be considered for my bladder to be removed.
Less than 5% chance, and they put you through having that done. And that's like, obviously initially it's temporary for a few weeks to see if it works normally, and then they go ahead and they insert it into your bottom cheek.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and then it kind of stimulates all the nerves at the bottom of the spine, but
yeah.
less than 5% chance, and they still
It was literally just a tick box exercise, which seems stupid because it was another general anaesthetic,
yeah.
another risk of infection.
Mhm.
But it had to be done. If I wanted to be considered for a urostomy, it had to be done. So
Holy smokes! Too many boxes to be ticked before you get. And a urostomy isn't like the other procedures, like we were talking beforehand. It's not like an SPC or the Mitrofanoff where they can be reversed. A urostomy is forever. It's
final. Yeah,
yeah.
final. Yeah.
And I, how did you feel as or in your early 20s, and you go from a normal life, your bladder is functioning, and then you hit a nerve or whatever it is that stops your bladder from functioning forever? How do you adapt with, all of a sudden being permanently catheterized and life completely changes forever, to the point then where they have to make a decision and say, right, we're going to have to do a urostomy here. I,
Uh, it felt like a long journey from kind of March 2018 when it all kicked off to October 23. Um, but at the start, kind of the first maybe year, 2 years, I didn't know whether there was a chance that my bladder might start working again or what the kind of plan was going forward. But the more it went on, the more poorly I became, the less of a quality of life I had. I lost jobs over the fact that I was too poorly to go into work. And kind of towards the end of my bladder journey, I didn't really care what happened anymore because until I got approved for that urostomy, and the approval was given in September 23, I'd kind of resigned myself to the fact that that was my life. I didn't really care the hospital admissions, the surgeries. I didn't really care anymore because in my eyes, there was no kind of any other plan. And that was it until either someone came up with a suggestion or I died.
yeah, and I'm just trying to, I can't even put it into words, but it's not a case of you were accepting of your circumstances. It had gone far beyond that to the point where you just didn't care because you weren't living, you were existing.
Yeah, I was literally, I was existing, waiting for either, yeah, like I said, someone to come up with a plan, a viable plan, or at some point, because we'd run out of antibiotics, my body was struggling. I was either going to get a plan or I would eventually die.
So in a way, when they said urostomy surgery, you were like, okay, this is a plan.
It was the first day for that 5.5 years that I thought actually I might have a chance at a life and a chance to live out the career that I'd planned for myself when I was kind of yay high, and all the dreams and things that you have when you're little that kind of over those years had just disappeared. And so the day that I got told that I could have urostomy, I cried, mum cried, but it was the day that I thought, you know what, I might actually have a chance. I might get a life.
Did you have to do your own research when they said Fowler syndrome? Is that something that happens to people, or is it as a result of they've hit a nerve whenever they were doing your pelvic surgery?
So it's nothing to do with the damage they caused in the surgery is a different issue completely to the Fowlers. But Fowlers tends to be something that normally women develop. There's a very, very small percentage chance of developing it when you have pelvic or abdominal surgery. So it was just coincidence, unfortunate coincidence, that my bladder was damaged and I got Fowlers as well.
So the bladder then just stops working as such.
Yeah, so from March 2018, when I had that op, I never went for a wee naturally again.
So from when you were told you were having urostomy surgery, until you had it, how long was that window? Was it weeks? Was it months?
Just over 6 weeks.
Okay.
Just over 6 weeks. So I met my new consultant for the first time in the September, and we had our hopes pinned on him saying, I will agree to do it. It had gone to National MDT. I'd had a first opinion from my old consultant. I then had to get a second opinion before it went to National MDT, and that second opinion was going to take about 14 months because they specified the hospital they wanted it from. So I actually paid privately to see the consultant that they named that they wanted to give the second opinion. I paid privately to get that. And then, yeah, when I eventually met Mr. Shah in the September of 23, we were hoping that he would say, I'll do it. But we knew that the waiting times were long. Nationally, the waiting times are long. So we'd kind of gone in with the fact of if he says yes, brilliant, that's the hope we can hold on to, and we'll just have to wait as long as it takes. And he turned around to me and we had a very frank discussion. He told me that he couldn't make me normal. And did I understand that whatever he did, he could not make me normal? Not that I've ever been normal, but it'd take a lot more than remove my bladder to make me normal. But after, yeah, a very frank discussion, he turned around and said, what do you think of the 10th of October?
Wow.
So
6 long weeks or 6 short weeks?
I don't remember them very well. I think I was back and forth to the hospital at least once a week in those 6 weeks. But I wasn't very well. I'd spent a month and a half in my local hospital that summer, with sepsis, and then was very poorly when I came out still. So I don't really have much memory apart from panicking the whole 6 weeks that it was going to get cancelled.
Yeah, and everything depends on it. And always said if it's going to be that one person, it's going to be you that would have to. Yeah, it's just how chronic illness goes, sadly.
Yeah.
Did you know anyone with a stoma? Had you done research on it?
Yeah, so we've got a family friend who's had a stoma since she was a teenager. She's got she had a colostomy, she's got an ileostomy now. So I knew of stomas, and she was very supportive in the lead up. Let me ask all the questions I needed. Let me see her change her bag so I could kind of literally lay eyes on a real stoma instead of that dummy plastic thing they give you to stick on your stomach to one of them. Yeah.
Just lives beside me now.
Your little friend. So yeah, she was amazingly supportive. I'd never met or kind of known of anyone with a urostomy, but yeah, I did know of someone that had an ileostomy.
I think the general consensus is not everyone knows someone with a stoma, but if they do, it's more than likely for their bowel and not their bladder.
Yeah.
Not Ruby. What is a urostomy? And then, when you get even deeper into it, you say a nephrostomy, they go, what? Like there's so many, options, or not options, but like, what is the word? Versions of a stoma
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
that people just don't know about. So you had some insight then before your surgery, which obviously benefited you, which is
Yeah.
great. Um, when you had your surgery done, then what was that like waking up from surgery with the SPC was gone?
I was in the high dependency unit when I came around from theatre. I wasn't allowed to see my parents for 24 hours. They had 24 hours to stabilise me and get me kind of to a place where I was well enough for mum and dad to see me. I have very, very few memories of that whole admission. Most of what I know is from what I've been told from what mum and dad have told me and what the consultant and my specialist nurse have told me. I've got some pictures that mum took of me in the high dependency with an absolute moon face because I was full of fluid. But she said the first thing I said to her was, "Can you double check they actually have done it?" And I got her to pull the sheet back and double check that my Mitrofanoff was gone. I had no catheter, and the stoma was there. But I have very few memories.
So recovery, once you kind of get stabilized and eventually you get home from hospital, how did you manage with that? Was it completely different to having an SPC?
Very different. My when I had my catheter, I wore a tubey pad around my belly button to kind of catch all the gunk that came out of it, and it was permanently attached to a see-through leg bag. So I couldn't, well, I could have worn shorts. I chose not to wear shorts, but you could see very, very clearly um, what was in my bag and what was kind of coming out of my stomach. Um, the recovery physically was hard. I wasn't well going into the surgery and I lost a lot of weight post-op. But it was it was a journey, I guess. And as soon as I started kind of putting the weight back on, the recovery started getting easier. But I was very much in the headspace before I had my op of I'm ready, like because they had to do like a counselling session with my soon to be stoma nurse before I had the op to make sure that mentally I was prepared. And because of the line of work that I'm in, nothing really makes me squeamish. I was desperate to have my stoma. I was desperate to get a quality of life back. So I was like, I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's go. And when I got home, I wouldn't look at my stoma. I was convinced it smelled. It didn't. I didn't want anything to do with it and I was very much dependent on my mum to do my bag changes and do anything to do with the care of my stoma because I didn't want anything to do with it.
And at what point then was there a turning point for you of realizing I can do this myself? And
I think as I started to physically get better and as I was kind of stabilizing mentally and accepting that actually this is what I wanted and this is it forever now. So basically put your big girl pants on and get on with it. I started to kind of own it a bit more myself. That added to the fact that my first bag change at home was an absolute train wreck. Me and mum had no idea what we were doing. I still had stents in at the time, and trying to fish two stents into a stoma bag before you can get it over the stoma and on the skin is a nightmare. So after that bag change, I think we went through 7 bags just trying to change it that first time. I kind of was like, okay, I need to be able to do this myself. I can't be reliant on mom forever. And I needed to work a way of first managing it with the stents, and obviously after the stents were out, just managing it in general because as a young woman, I can't be reliant on someone else. I didn't want to be reliant on someone else. I had the ability to change my own bag, and I think it was part of me taking control of my my own life, my own story.
Yeah, I think acceptance is kind of the big point for everyone. It's kind of like all of a sudden, okay, this is how it is. This is how it's going
Yeah,
to be. This is for the better. And I've got to pull up my big girl pants and get on with this. And I think
yeah.
that's the turning point for most people. And I think,
It wasn't even that because I know some people kind of have a lot of a love-hate relationship with their stoma, and to start off with, they don't want to look at it and don't want to be involved with it because they hate it and they hate what that represents
mhm,
and everything they've been through that's meant that they've had to get to that point. And it wasn't that I hated it and what it represented, I just couldn't stomach looking at it. And all my senses were really heightened. And my stomach, because it's urine and not stool, my stomach doesn't smell. There is no smell that comes from, unless I've got an infection, there's no smell that comes from my output and there's no smell that comes from my stomach. But I was convinced that that thing stunk. And I just didn't want anything to do with it.
I like personally, I know at the start there is a new smell obviously in your nostrils because you've just been through this surgery. But I think, looking back, I think after maybe like 12 weeks or something, it started to like disappear. So at first I was
Yeah,
convinced people could smell it, but it's actually this new function that's happening in your body. And because you do empty your bag, you're aware, you're in tune with it. So it's like embedded in your nostrils and you've got
yeah,
the smell. So you're convinced everyone else can smell it. But then after a while it just disappears,
yeah,
you're totally confident.
yeah,
And I was actually sitting with someone recently and they had a colostomy and she was like, "Oh, sorry, I passed wind." And I was like, okay. She was like, "But can you smell that?" And I was like, wait, what type of bags are you using? So we were talking about branded
yeah,
bags, whatever, but
yeah,
actually we used the same brand of stoma bags, but hers was an older, outdated version. I was like, if you told me you used the same bags as me, you wouldn't smell anything. So that led to a whole conversation,
yeah,
paranoia over, if I get on a bus and my stoma passes wind, I like to spray stuff, but okay, everybody is completely different in how they kind of react to things. So yeah,
yeah,
it's just that new, I don't know, it gets in your nose is all I can say.
yeah,
After a while it just disappears. And it's the paranoia more than anything of
yeah.
can the person sitting beside me smell this?
And you presume everyone must know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You presume like like we talk about in the chronic illness community about invisible illnesses and things, don't we? And how on the outside we look perfectly normal, but it's in those kind of first few weeks that you're just like everyone must know. Everyone's looking at me going, I know she's got stoma and she smiles and whatever. Like you presume everyone knows exactly what's going on.
So now you wear the shorts, you wear everything you want.
Bikinis, crop tops, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. You're getting your confidence back. Um, I know you're having a difficult journey. You said you've had more UTIs now since you've had your urostomy before. Before you didn't have those UTIs. But it's down to deeply embedded infection.
Yeah.
But would you say from you've had your urostomy surgery that you're getting normal life back to before like 2018, whenever this all started?
Yeah, so I had no quality of life before my op when my bladder was failing. I never thought that the career that I'd dreamed of as a child was ever going to be something that would be possible or within my reach in the situation that I was in. Um, when I wasn't trying to go to work, which failed most of the time, I was either in hospital or in bed. Um, so yeah, now I'm on the career path that I've always dreamed of. I'm making new friends. I'm going out and doing things that I never would have done before. I'm a completely different person, but in completely the right way.
Completely the right way. I love that. Absolutely love it. And to see you on holiday last week, looking absolutely stunning, doing
Mhm.
all of the things that you wanted to do. I mean, you just look at you, and I don't look at you and go, "Oh, I see a urostomy, I see a stoma." Like you just look like a normal girl living a normal life, which
Yeah,
is what you're now effectively doing. which
Yeah.
has been amazing. I know you're battling on this journey for what are your next steps because the infection they can't get on top of. Um,
We don't know what the next steps are at the moment. I'm on antibiotics permanently. Have been. I've had a 3-week break since February 2024. So there's only been 3, and not solid weeks, kind of bits and pieces, but fixed together. There's been 3 weeks where I've not been on antibiotics since February last year. We don't know what the plan is. Hopefully something will come to fruition that will mean that this can kind of be nipped in the bud once and for all. But for now, it's a case of just keeping battling the doctors that don't want to get involved and that don't want to help, and keeping pestering my amazing consultant whilst he tries and works out a plan.
and this journey, even though you've had your stoma surgery, it's still about advocating for yourself. Even now, even on the other side of surgery, you have to keep doing that because
Yeah.
you don't get anywhere unless you do.
No, unfortunately, you have to become a friendly nuisance, otherwise you get forgotten about. So yeah, advocacy is the biggest tool, but also completely exhausting at times. I think you'll agree.
Evie, if there was something that you could tell your younger self, think back to 2017, 2018, when this was all starting, you got a little golden nugget that you could tell your younger self of how it would be in years to come.
Um, it does get better and it will get better. And that the life that you think in 2017, 18 will never ever be a possibility does become a possibility. Just goodness knows what that was. Just keep going because it's hard, it's tough, it's tiring, but yeah, you can achieve whatever you set your mind to. So
Probably been down to advocating for yourself and pushing for a better quality of life, even though you were in that slump, in that place of this is how life is, and this is how life's going to be. When you push, 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 there is an answer, there is a solution there, long term.
yeah, you've just got to mentally, I think when you're in the kind of the midst of it, you feel like advocating's not getting you anywhere because you just keep hitting brick walls and nothing seems to change. But at some point, there is that person, that professional that will turn around and go, this isn't right, this isn't okay, I'll do something about it. And for some people, that can take a matter of months. For some people, that can take years. But there is someone out there that will help. You've just got to keep shouting.
Mhm. Evie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your very raw, very real bladder journey with us. I'm so sorry that you have had to go through that as a young female. It's not been an easy journey, but you publicly sharing your journey here with us today and on social media will definitely inspire other people. There was probably people out there who weren't sharing their journey at the time, and through you sharing yours, you're going to have a knock-on effect on other people. So
Well,
keep
thank
doing
you for having me.
what you're doing. Yeah, you're absolutely amazing, and yeah, thank you so
No
much.
problem at all.
Guys, that's it for us today. Do come back and join us next week for another episode. If you have any questions that we haven't covered today, Evie's Instagram handle will be tagged below in the show notes. So do go over and give her a follow. Pop her a question if you have it. Follow along on her journey. But like I said before, we're not professionals. We're just sharing our own individual stories here. If you feel like you're um, in somewhere of a health journey and you're asking questions or you think you've got something wrong or you're suffering, go and seek the professional help that you need from GPs or consultants and continue to advocate for yourself until you get those answers. So yeah, that's it for us today, folks. It's over and out from myself and Evie.
Mhm.